Hello, hello, and welcome to our masterclass speaker series, Thrive Through Turbulent Times. Thank you for joining us again. Oh my gosh, we have been going through days and days. We're more than halfway through at this point, our entire series, and it's amazing all that the speakers and the masterclasses, all that's being offered. I mean, there's stuff that's blowing my mind and is supporting me. And I'm tracking along with you. I've been doing these masterclasses, and every night, my partner and I, he and I sit down and we do the masterclass with you, and we do the exercises and we do the homework. So I'm doing it with you, and I'm having my own ahas, and I'm so loving what you're sharing in the Facebook group, or some of you choose to share an email. So thank you so much for that. So today is a special, fantastic bonus live. And for those of you, you might be joining us on the recording, welcome too. Today's guest is a lovely human who I am delighted to introduce you to. And I think he comes from a bit of a unique perspective in the approach to Thrive. So this is a fun thing. So he is the CEO of Venture Greatly. And you can put him and I together in two of our tools, and you can come up with the book Daring Greatly by Brene Brown. Because I have Daring Dialogues and he has Venture Greatly. Put them together and we've got a little tip of our hat to Brene Brown, which is fantastic.
One of my favorite humans.
Yes, right. Oh my gosh. She'll be coming on the show at some point here. So he is known as the Client Whisperer. And one of the reasons I'm thrilled that you get to have an experience of him and his material is I think there's a really interesting relationship within us internally of where we are a client to ourselves. And sometimes maybe our mind is a client to our heart. Maybe our heart is a client to our mind, depending on where we are. So I think it's a really interesting lens, as well as just this idea of self-leadership. So without further ado, I welcome to the show with great applause, Tony Banta.
Such an honor to be here, Brenda. Thanks for having me.
Oh my goodness, we have some interesting...
I think we're joined by a little one.
We are. We've got a little one in the background.
It's okay, Matt. We love baby
little
sounds.
Ones. Yeah, we do.
Yeah, we love little ones.
The little cooing, right? It makes my heart sing, which is fantastic.
Me too.
All right.
It makes me miss my daughter.
Oh my God.
So thanks for that, Matt.
Yeah. Oh. And it's
such an honor to be here, Brenda.
Thank you. Yes. I'm looking forward to this time, and thank you for investing some time with us and with our community around this topic of thriving. So tell us a bit about you, how you come to your perspective, if you will, on thriving. How about, some little tidbit or a story where maybe you've overcome or you've come up with this perspective, your perspective.
Yeah, totally. And I think it's I'm going to preface this by saying it's an evolution, right? Like I'm a student just like all of you. I just also have a passion for sharing what I've learned, and sharing what I've learned so far. And, tomorrow I reserve the right to change my mind and to share the new evolutions of where that is. It is, we've been clarifying some of the languaging with my team in the last week around some of the ways that we want to talk about leadership in 2021. And who we really want to speak to is the imperfect leaders, the people who are willing to get out there and say, I know I'm not perfect, and I know I have value to share. I know that there are people that need my help. I'm not going to wait until I have it perfected in exactly the right language, or until I have the foolproof 5 steps that are going to save the world for me to actually get out and interact with people and serve the people serve the people in our community, serve the people in our client base, serve the, just to be of service to our friends, right? And to be a servant leader in that way. So how did I get there? Lots of failing, right? That's how we learn not to, I heard Matt's child, at least I'm assuming that's your child, Matt, or you just discovered a child in your journeys, which is fine, which is great either way. But, I was thinking not that long ago, my young daughter was learning how to walk, and she learns to walk by stumbling, right? And then falling down and then picking herself back up. And that's a lot of where my story comes from, is I found myself in a lot of, I have a history of being a software developer. So I'm a systems thinker. I am, my background is in looking at systems and in writing code, in programming computers. And I very quickly realized Brenda and I were sharing war stories a few weeks ago on this, of when you're in a corporate environment and you're working on projects. One of the things that happens pretty frequently is there's dysfunction. There's dysfunction inside of the organization. That's true for smaller businesses too. There are just fewer levels that you have to. There's just less politicking. There's less structure. There are less, glass walls that seem like they promote an open working environment, but you still can't open the doors. They still lock just the same way. Have you noticed that? And in doing that, I found two really powerful things. I discovered one, that I am an imperfect human, and I have my own emotions and my own emotional needs. And those things come up like little friends, right? Like little parts of me, little parts of me that are like, oh, hey, Tony, you're not really feeling super grounded. You really need a friend, and you need to hang all of your self-worth on the relationship with that friend, or with that person that's a client, or with these various things, right? Of course, the part of me didn't literally say that, but that's how it can feel. And so I'm in these situations, and then they ask for something, right? They're like, oh yeah, can you do this special thing? It's like, well, I right now it feels really safe for you to be my best friend. So yeah, let's do it. Let's throw that extra thing in, right? And then it comes back to bite me. And so that's a big part of how I came to the position that I came to. And some of what I want to share with all of you today is both the client leadership part. How do we lead clients? But first, how do we lead ourselves? How do we get to know those parts of us that have those needs? And we think, right, we can put on a tailored, suit jacket, and we can act like we have it together, right? We even might get in the nice car and go to the nice office. And from the outside, people are like, oh, you're doing great. Like, Brenda, you look so great. Tony, you're great. Sandy, Leo, Diana, you're like, you have it together. But then, do we feel like we have it together when we're confronted in a situation where we have to say no, when we don't, when every little voice inside of us is screaming yes, or when we need to hold a boundary with a client because that's what their growth is dependent on? And there are parts of us that say, but it's so much easier if I take responsibility, right? If I've been there where where a client's been upset, and it's been easier for me to be like, yep, totally our fault. But you know what? When it's not our fault, and it's almost never 100-0, right? When it's not our fault and we take that, what do? We prevent the client from being able to live with the reality, with the consequences of their decision-making, which is the only way that any of us learn. It goes back to, and I have no idea, I think that he may have dropped off the line today, but it goes back to, was it Mark? It goes back to, his little kid there. It goes back to my daughter, who 6 months ago was learning how to walk. How does she learn? She learns by tripping and falling and picking herself back up. And as much as I want to protect her from that and just hold her in my arms, and as much as we want to, with clients, have things go easily and be liked and all of those things, we have to lead ourselves to be totally comfortable with the value that we're bringing to situations, so that we can hold those boundaries with our clients and give them the incredible gift of being able to learn from their own mistakes and grow. Because in any client relationship, there's the tactics, there's the done for you part, there's the service, right? Like we're not going to teach clients how to write code. We're going to, back in my software development days, we're going to write the code for them, obviously, but they also have to make their decisions, right? They have to decide what they want it to do. And when they change their mind, it's going to work differently. And so we have to, as leaders, as project managers, as consultants, as coaches, we have to define where that tactical piece is. And then we need to define where the leadership piece is and be really comfortable holding that line and knowing when we're talking to a client and we're saying, to ourselves, I'm doing this for your own good. And I'm saying no to what you're asking for because this is actually going to help you. We need to be super grounded. And that comes from leading ourselves and starting with having these tough conversations with ourselves.
Yes. Yes. There's so many pieces in there, Tony. And I think starting with that we are imperfect and that we are perfect in our imperfections, that we are constantly evolving and growing. And it's why so many people are joining us in this journey in these master classes, is that they're looking to continue to develop themselves, for us to develop ourselves, for you to develop yourself. And that we're not striving for perfection. We're striving for evolution. We're looking to continue to expand our fulfillment, to expand our skills. And there's something, and what I'm hearing with the leadership piece, and I love the example of with your daughter and her learning to walk, is we have these pieces and parts of ourselves, and some of them are mature. Like there's the piece of us that can adult, hopefully a fair amount of the time, but then there are other aspects that are underdeveloped that you can look at as that is a little bit of a childlike aspect. And so when we're coming to leading ourselves, it's tapping into that parent part of ourselves as an example and as a metaphor to be able to hold the boundary for the little or underdeveloped aspect of us. Because, for example, if you're being a good dad and your daughter wanted an ice cream cone and she's like, I want the big one that's 4 scoops. And she can't eat all 4 scoops and it's going to melt before she ever gets finished. And so the best thing you can do is hold that boundary. And it's like, you get 1 scoop, and she might get really upset and cry because I know that I have little aspects of me that are going to throw a tantrum like, I want it my way. But actually, it's the most loving thing that we can do, is that we're holding that boundary and we're creating that safe space for the person to grow and develop. And the other piece I liked in there that I really want to point out is in holding the boundaries, right? Staying grounded within ourselves and making sure that we're being of service, serving either that aspect within ourselves or some other person, is that if we're doing it for their evolution, we're doing it to support them, that they might also have some resistance. And it's the most kind and generous and loving thing is for them to have an experience of their own consequences, as well as to hold that boundary so that they get a sense of where they are within it, that we're not going in and rushing in to do it for them.
Totally.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. To speak on that for a second, I was having a conversation with my wife, and as you can imagine, this is the kind of language that I use at work. So you can imagine what, conversations at home end up being, right? We talk about feelings and we talk about, all of these things. And I was having a conversation with my wife, and she was having a rough time. She was having a rough day. And I said, I'm not really okay with the way that you're talking to me right now, but I totally hear that this is tough for you. And how about if we pick this up tomorrow? Right. So like boundary, and like in that I'm not okay with how this feels. This doesn't really feel good, but it sounds like you could use some space. And then the next day she's like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. I was going crazy there. Like I was going crazy. Thanks. Sorry for, those couple names I called you. They're not really true. and that's a gift. She said this in some of that is a gift that you did that I don't want to count on, needing from you very often. And that's what conversations between evolved humans sound like, right? Because we all have, the more that we try and do, the more that we try and push the limits of like what's comfortable, a mediocre life, service is a really big value for us. And that means we need to play at a higher level. And the higher of a level we play, the more we push, the more the things are going to be tough. The more that we're going to, the higher the transformation in a client relationship, the more that is on the line, the more that emotional, that internal struggle with our clients is going to play out, because we're taking them from point A and we're taking them to point B. And humans don't just, like, it's why schools and colleges have guidance counselors and they have things like this, right? And in the professional world, that's us. That's client leaders. That's our job, is to show up and to do that and to hold that line. And it's a gift, because people deserve to have those. They don't deserve to be unkind or to, cross that line, or to be abusive in the workplace, or to harass, or all of those things that I'm sure Brenda and I have seen more often than we'd like to admit. And all of you, I'm sure that you can think of examples. That's not okay, right? And at the same time, I think a lot of times, if people are given some more space and some permission to feel those feelings and to show up with a leader that's like, yeah, you have a right to process through what it is that's going on for you, that prevents them from spiraling out of control and getting worse and worse.
Yes. Yes, this is so valuable in our relationships, whether that's like with your wife or for your work relationships, for relationships with anyone. And I love the parallels of how then that also can be our relationship with ourselves. Because I don't know about you, but I think most of you can relate. You have an inner bully, right? Inner critic, call it what you want. Mine can be a real bully. And so are we going to allow that part of us to run ramshot over us and just take us to task and eviscerate and annihilate? And it's up to us, right? We're doing a dance within ourselves, but there are those aspects. It's like, if you personalize it as the inner bully, then you've got to come up with what's the piece of you, the core of you. It's like, I'm holding a boundary and I'm not going to talk to myself this way. You're not going to talk to me this way. And I get that you're upset, or maybe you feel unsafe, because like bullies out in the real world, they're scared and they're cowards. And it's the part of us that's scared that starts to kind of come in and really start going after us. And we can take a step and say, like, hey, you need a timeout. And let's explore more what's going on, and you can have your feelings, but you're not going to treat me this way. So I think it's so valuable and important that we do it with ourselves and practice it with ourselves just as much as we practice it in the relationships with other people. Like, it's both.
And one can't happen without the other. Realistically, we don't, as within, so is without. Like, as we have these dialogues inside, those are the kind of conversations we're comfortable with. So we're going to gravitate towards conversations and relationships that mirror those same ones that we have with ourselves. So the more that we can get to know, those parts of us, the better that, without even trying, we're going to, I don't mean to get a little woo-woo on everybody here, Brenda, but the more that we're going to manifest those relationships and those conversations out in the world, because we are speaking in a different way. And it's impossible when we're speaking to ourselves in a different way. It's impossible for that not to show up out in the world, for us to be speaking to people in a different way, for us to be more generous of spirit, because we're not run down, just trying to survive, just trying to shut up that nagging voice inside of my head that tells me I'm a failure. We're not in that mode, right? Like, I can say to myself, hey, you did good on these 3 things. You missed the mark on this one. I didn't start by talking to myself that way. I started by using my parents' voice, inside of my own head, saying, well, I'll love you when, and not that they ever said that, like, outwardly. I have an incredible mother. My father and my stepfather are both, they're both deceased, but, and they were wonderful in their own ways, when I was a kid, but that was how it felt. And because that is how it felt, that's what I played out, right? That's what I played out. Well, I'll love you, Tony, when you execute a perfect day and your email inbox is cleared and you responded to get that stuff over to Brenda. She was counting on you. She's going to be so disappointed in you. And that's how my internal conversation, that's how the dialogue was years ago, right? That's what daily life was like. And so, of course, when there was that one more email, right? That little feather, that like one more thing on top, of course I was like, just get away from me. I don't want to do any of this. Right. And then I would react, and then I'd have to be like, God darn, now I have to go apologize to someone. now I have to go say, I'm sorry. and I have to be like, I was having a really rough day. That doesn't excuse what I said. Please give me another chance. Right. But how much better if I can be super kind. It's funny, that was the example that you called out, Brenda. That's actually one of the questions in a freebie that we have for everyone. That was actually one of the questions, was that we have a little guide for all of you that we will talk about. But a question in the guide was, what are some of the ways that you talk about yourself the harshest? And what would you do if a friend talked to you that way? Or what would you do if a stranger was talking to your friend that way? What would you say? Frequently when I hear friends, beating up on themselves, I'll be like, Brenda, do not talk to my friend that way. Do not do that. I will take you down. No one talks to my friend Brenda that way.
Yeah, you got to love that. You got to have your own back. Yes. And when you don't, you got to have someone like Tony who's got your back, right? Who's going to step in and be like, no, you don't. Don't talk to my friend that way. I'm going to put a stop to this right now. So what other aspects, when you think of self-leadership, what are some of the other elements do you think for us to look at? Are there guideposts? What are your thoughts?
Totally. And I think that it all starts with vision. In that if you don't, there was actually a question from Sandy that actually alluded to this a little bit. So thanks for that, Sandy. It all starts with vision. And I like to think of these things hierarchically. I like to think about it sort of like, this is a funny analogy for those of us that have spent time in corporate. But if you imagine a corporate building, right? And it's so much worse than what you're imagining, by the way. It's not fancy or fun. Like it is for like 15 minutes until you realize it's the Matrix and it's all fake. But if we think about a corporate building, where are the executives, right? The executives are on the top floor. The executives are, way high up, and they don't get stuck in the doing very often. They're looking in the future. They're looking out. They're looking at the stock options that they're going to cash in. And if they're good, they're looking at how are they going to lead everybody in the organization to be more prosperous and to serve their clients more, which means they create more value, which means that more revenue comes into the company, right? And there are some phenomenal examples of this. I certainly don't mean to poo-poo on corporate America, just some of them. But the ones who are focused on value, the people in the top floor are looking at the vision. And that's where I like to go. I once a quarter, I make sure to go somewhere less in COVID times, but I make sure to go somewhere nice. And if I can, I get a little bit of altitude. I go to the mountains. I go to, I rent, I get a hotel room on the, penthouse floor. I do something that physically gets me a little bit altitude to use that to create some vision setting. And if it happens to be in a nice hotel in a nice city, and because we did really well that quarter and I get some nice room service and I feel like a king for the day, right? That's just bonus. That's just another form of that altitude for me to get that vision, for me to step out of the fray of everything that's happening and see what's possible. And I like to think of vision in 5+ year increments. So where will we be 5 years from now? Because when we think about where am I going to be next quarter, well, I need to actually be doing specific tactical things to be in a different position by next quarter. But as I look at, 5 years from now, it's an entirely different story. So as I'm looking across that horizon, I then break that down into goals. And I like to think of goals on an annual basis. This is just my process for me. I don't know that I talk a ton about this, but I like to think about goals in that way. And then I usually break them up into milestones, the like little things that like should be accomplished or could be accomplished by certain times. That bit of framework is valuable to me because when I'm doing that, what always comes up is when I'm reviewing those milestones and what do we think we're going to get done as a team. And my team and I actually do this now. We have about 10 people on our team in total, and we are reviewing this a little bit every week, and we review this in a bigger way every month. And when we do that, sometimes we hit the mark, sometimes we don't hit the mark. And don't tell my team this, just keep this between us. I don't care. I don't care whether we make the mark or we don't make the mark. There are some things that I care about, right? Because we have to make money so that we can afford to pay everybody, so that we can afford to, so that we can afford all of the things that we need to afford, the like investing in the next initiatives that we're doing, making sure that our team that like gets paid and paid well, all of those things. Anyway, the reason why I don't really care is because even if we don't hit the mark, we get to find out why, and that's data. So like number one, if we get success, that's phenomenal. If we don't get success, well, then that's just data that we then get to use to find out what's happening. And we get to look at that data on both tactical and an emotional leadership level. So we get to look at that data and say, and I had tough, courageous conversation with myself last year when I saw that I was doing some things that was sabotaging our own success. And I had to get honest with myself about that and say like, what part of this is mine? Because I'm feeling an impulse to blame others. And that's usually right, when we're pointing the finger, there are three more pointed back at us, right? That old little saying. So I feel the impulse to do that and to say, this is someone else's fault that we're not winning. What am I doing to sabotage, or what am I doing to stand in the way of that? Or what is the emotional need that's inside of me that I'm not presencing, that I'm not talking to, and really finding out what that concern is. And I did have some concerns. So I got clear on those. It's not super relevant for me to go through the play-by-play with you right now, but I heard those parts in myself. And it was only because we have a little bit of structure, some minimal structure like that, that I was able to see the data. And the same thing happens everywhere. If we're in a client engagement, the same thing is true. We need to be capturing a little bit of data along the way with the client, even if it's like a weekly survey with the client, right? Like I have some life coaches, personal trainers, people like that are like, well, what can I do to like gather data? Sandy's on it with the questions. Thank you, Sandy. I'll circle back and read those, or Brenda can let me know when's the right time.
Yes.
It's only with that structure. And if you are a life coach, personal trainer, more casual kind of coach in your style, just have a weekly check-in, have a survey, have something minimal that you can do that's at least capturing some of what we like to call the heartbeat of the relationship. So then when we see that going in not such a great way, right? We're imperfect leaders. Even if we have to take responsibility for it not going well, we get to have that conversation. If we think the client needs to take responsibility for something in their life, we can ask them, hey, I'm seeing some things here, and it might be a little bit tough for you to hear. Are you okay with me sharing my perspective in what might be leading to your results or the lack of the results that you want? And then you get there. If they say no, well, then the client relationship's dead. Shocker. Because if they say no, then they don't really want to get better and there's no real point. So just like charge them money through the rest of their contract and show up and like do your best, but be kind of clear that, well, if they're not open, then, there's not that much that's going to happen. But almost never does someone say, no, I'm not interested. Sometimes they're like, yes, but I'm mad at you. And it's like, oh, you're mad at me? Oh my gosh, tell me more about that. I want to know. I want to understand. But at the end of the day, I'm going to share the thing that I'm seeing as a leader, and as an imperfect leader, I don't care if it's my fault. I'm thrilled if it's my fault. If it's my fault, it's something that I get to do better next time. And that's just data to make the system better.
Oh, yes. Yes. I'm like, there's so much that I just love in all of that it's data, that no matter what, that we're not attached to the result or the outcome, that we know that progress is happening, is that if we're staying in action and we're open and receptive to the information that comes, that even if we don't hit the mark, that is a great learning. And in some cases, we might get more data and then we're able to adjust and correct, because we're constantly correcting if we choose. Like if you made me think of the like a GPS in your car, and you're going along and you think, oh, your turn is 1,000 feet, the next turn is 1,000 feet. I'm like, I don't know what 1,000 feet is. So I make the turn too early, and they're like, recalculating. So, it's the opportunity that I did something, and now I'm getting data back to go, okay, you have the opportunity to correct and change your course. But it's data, so that we don't get attached and go, so that we don't feed that inner bully or that critic and be like, oh, well, you suck. You didn't hit the mark. You're awful. Or to someone in our team. So I love that it feels very neutral, that there's no energy or heat on it, so that it allows us to kind of take more of a system approach, which is something Tony is so brilliant at. And, you take that full system approach and you don't personalize it and make it about some failing. It's like, oh, here's no. Great. We now know this piece. We now know, okay, that's not the right path, and we've got to make this adjustment over here.
Totally.
So I love that, and just the approach of it, that it's more data, as well as like the surveying and checking in, and then the piece of like, we got to be coachable. We got to be open. If we're not open, or the other person not open, there's nowhere to go. Thank you and goodbye. So, well, I think that there's so much more you have, and what I'd love is that I know there's some question that I'd love to get to some questions, and then we'll be able to have some final thoughts. And those of you that want to stay on, we'll be on for a few extra minutes. But I think Kelly probably has been on it, grabbing the questions from the chat. So, Kelly, what have we got?
Yeah, I thought maybe we'd start with Sandy. So Sandy, I'm going to send you a request just to unmute yourself if you want to talk to Tony and Brenda directly.
Yeah, so we
love your photo too, Sandy.
Yeah. And I'll go ahead and put her in the spotlight, Brenda.
Great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm not on because that photo was 2 years ago, and I am still working on improving. Stress has led to all kinds of negative impact, and I'm struggling to get back to where I was.
Can I play with you for a second there, Sandy? I want to thank you first of all so much.
I'm supposed to say yes now, right?
You don't have to. No, you don't have to.
You have free will. You have free will, our friend.
Yes.
Thank you. So here's a great example of being open, because she has no idea where we're going to go with this. So thank you for your courage and for being open. And I want to acknowledge you for being real and what's happened, and that there has been an impact on you. And as Tony was saying, it is not about perfection. You do not need to look a certain way. COVID-19, like the 19 put on 19 pounds. I had my own bout with that too. Like it is so not about that, what you look like, or if you're a mess, awesome. Bring your mess, because we all have messy pieces. And somebody had asked me in the Facebook group, it was like, yeah, okay, are you real? Because I do share a fair amount of my vulnerability. Is like, yeah, because if I try to show up perfect, because I used to all the time, I know that dance. It's exhausting. So if I can share a little bit of where I'm falling short, where I'm a mess, where I'm imperfect, we get to connect there for one. So it's an invitation if you choose, and by no means do you need to put on your camera, but I want you to know that wherever you are is perfectly okay, and we accept that, and we accept you where you are. Okay.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Awesome.
And so I'm working on that inner message, but it's a little ways in coming yet.
Yeah, it's a work in progress. We all are.
So I love your program. I love the people you've had on it. I love the messages. They have been extremely helpful for me along my journey. I have a son who is way ahead of me, and at some point, the parent becomes the child, and the child becomes the parent. But we have a great adult relationship, and I'm very grateful for that. So anyway, I think that, I don't know if your messages are a lot of what my son has been doing, pro-social, nonviolent communication, inner working. Everything resonates, and I just want to thank you both so much. And how do you think we as a society, because I feel that especially after the last election with COVID was an extra challenge, but I feel like we're moving backwards, not forwards. Now, I'm older, So, you know, I have adult children. I remember the 50s and the 60s. We were neighbors. We were neighborly. We listened to each other. We didn't agree necessarily, but we dialogued. Do you think social media is really having a negative impact on that? And what can we as individuals be doing to help?
That's a big question. Tony, awesome. Go for it.
I love this question. A friend of mine the other day, I'm gonna step on some. I'm gonna see if we can dance through the landmine field, Brenda. How about if we try? Do you want to dance with me?
Let's dance.
I was talking to a friend the other day, who, and I'll explain like a bit after I share this of the, like where I was coming from with this. I said to a friend the other day who was just seething, like they were like, this is in the beginning of January when things were not wonderful, and not that there's been a time that they have been in the last 12 months, in my opinion. And like, they were just like how terrible that, Donald Trump is. Like, he just hates everybody and he's awful. And I just was like, this is fun. I'm gonna play with this for a minute. How do you know? And then they were like, well, I saw him say this or this. And I'm like, oh, okay. Do you ever say things that you wish you didn't say because you were in the moment of something? And then they're like, are you comparing me to him? Right? And I'm like, no, I'm just saying sometimes I say things that I'm not super proud of. And sometimes I say things and then like Kelly, the producer, like cuts me off right at the exact wrong time. And I'm kidding, Kelly, you're wonderful. And then it sounds like I said one thing when I really said something else. In no means am I defending Donald Trump, right? That's not my point. I don't need to. I don't care. But when we talk about these beliefs that we have around people that we've never met, around topics that don't affect us nearly as much as sometimes the emotions around the topics affect us. And I'm not making light of the places where things do deeply affect us. I think that there really are a number of places where that's very true. And I don't want to make light of how the emotions of some of those things affect us, because the emotions can feel the emotion around, I've had conversations with, family where I felt like punched in the stomach, and we were on the phone. They were on the other side of the country. How did I feel that way? Right. When they couldn't physically punch me in the stomach. So I don't want to make light of that. And also, we are interpreting reality through screens. We are having fewer and fewer conversations with people. And this is why when I was talking to my friend in person, I was going to hold space for this and engage at that level, because there was all of this emotion around a person that he has never met and around a topic that he did not personally witness. And we are interpreting reality through these screens and through these gatekeepers that send us reality in the form of algorithms on social media and in the form of editors and producers in traditional media, and through the lens of our friends on social media, right? Because we see the posts of the people that we spend the most time with. So we're interpreting reality in ways that are not necessarily grounded in reality. How did, just to take a microcosm, dancing through the landmine field here, to just take an example, how was it that just 4 years ago there was a group of people that was thoroughly convinced that there was a basement underneath a pizza shop in Washington, D.C., where John Podesta was trafficking children? And child trafficking is a serious thing, right? But how was there a group of people that were thoroughly convinced that a basement, by all accounts that I've seen this, sometimes I dive down the conspiracy theory route just to see what it's like down there. And then I'm like, I'm just backing right up and getting back to my own work. But from everything I've read, there's no possible way that could have happened in that place. But how did people believe it so deeply that they were willing to get emotionally bothered by it? Well, because they were told, and because it is impossible for us to reconcile how everything that's going on in the world. Was a long lead in to something that I really mean to say. If we feel like things are getting worse than they are, and if we feel like things are getting better, or if we focus on the ways in which things are getting better, then we're going to get more of that, because we're going to get more of whatever we focus on. And I've had to stop stop watching the news through periods of time because I've listened to myself and I've said, this doesn't bring any more value. This isn't leading me to a place where I have more actionable things that I feel good about that I can go and do, right? And that doesn't mean that I don't care. That doesn't mean that I'm disengaged. It means that I had to make that decision of, there's a lot of good that I can do in a day and in a week. And I don't think that I'm that much better than, I think you are, Sandy, in terms of the amount of good that we can do. Because some days the most good that I do is just say hi to the guy making my burrito at Chipotle. And I'm like, dude, how's it going today? Like, how's life? And I'm really sorry that we can't see each other's faces because of these masks. But if you did, I'd be smiling because I really appreciate you helping me out and making me a burrito because I really need that today. Sometimes that's the biggest impact that I have. But if I'm focused on society getting worse and then I see him and he has a tattoo and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, is that tattoo a gang sign? And is he one of the people that's making it worse? And then I don't want to be friendly to him because now I'm scared because now I'm focused on my own survival and rather than just being in the moment, because I don't care whether he's a gang member or, anything else. I just want to have a human connection and then eat a burrito. And if the more that I stay in that place, the more that I see things getting better. And the more that I tune in to the people who literally profit off of things being bad, the less that I feel capable and energized to do good.
Yes. Beautiful. Thank you.
How'd we do? How many landmines did we step on, people?
Yeah. Thank you for leading so beautifully through the landmines. We did not explode. So that was very nice. Very nicely done. And I appreciate your willingness to go there, and Sandy for the question. And I'll add one piece, which is I understand where the question is coming from, that society and the way that we live and interact in life has changed significantly. And it's very easy to pit them against each other and say, the times when we used to have, milk delivered in glass to our door versus now we've got milk maybe that's being processed on a farm and it's in a carton and it's not live, all the rest of that. We could take these and put them up against each other and make a comparison. And my question is, why? What does that serve? What do we want? What are we looking for? And so because it's very easy to do. And I think that we could certainly put things up against each other and we could claim one thing maybe is better than the other. But again, it depends on the overall lens that we're looking at. But I go back to, what's your desired outcome? What is it that you want? And when we focus on what we want and where we're going, and we can choose to see, as Tony's saying, that we can choose to see the lightness and we can choose to see the positive. And I'm not talking about Pollyanna. I'm not saying, that there aren't things that aren't going on that need to be addressed, but what can we do in this moment? And what is it that we want in this moment? And sometimes it's like, I really feel anxious. I'm really feeling, I don't understand where our political landscape is going. Sometimes I get really frustrated about it. I don't like maybe that there's censorship and algorithms are affecting the information and the quality of the information that I get. And I might get super frustrated, but what's driving that and what do I want? And I'm realizing, I'm feeling anxious and maybe I don't feel as safe as I'd like to. So then what in my world, what in your world can you do when you have clarity about what it is that you want? And then take that. And the next step in my offer is just exactly like Tony gave a great example, is that how can you go and do that and be that in someone else's world? So if you can go out and be, smile to the person who is making your burrito, or have a nice human connection, or pet someone's dog, or whatever, is take that outside of yourself and be a part of giving it and creating it in the world. Because this is where all the change starts, is within us. And I know we're getting super deep and I love it. But anyway, so the change, like as Martin Luther King said, be the change, or I'm sorry, that was Gandhi, be the change. But both of them, same thing, is that we've got to start here. And then can we impact our family? Can we impact our neighbor? Can we impact the person at our barista at Starbucks? Can we have a positive impact? So that we can then I think part of it, and the last piece I'll say about this, and we'll get to the next question, is I think then we feel less alone, because one aspect of maybe what's going on is that maybe we do feel a bit more isolated. Maybe we don't feel as connected. We don't live in tribes in the same way that we used to. And I believe that we are tribal beings by nature, biologically, physiologically. And so is there a way that we can start to bring in more tribe into our life? And that is within our own immediate family. That is, showing up here on this live and showing up in the Facebook group and participating in this way. We're creating a bit more of connection. And I think that we are our best humans, and we make the most impact when we are in connection and we are in tribe. So thank you so much. Wonderful question, Sandy. Thank you.
Do we have any, could I share something on that, Brenda?
Yes.
Do we have any comic book fans in the house? Are there any are there any fellow nerds? No, just me? Brenda? Shout out to all the nerds. In the DC comic, The Watchmen, that's had a movie was made about 14 years ago, and then a recent TV show that was phenomenal was just made on HBO based on the comic. There is a quote that I frequently think about, and it is one of the lead superheroes, and it's kind of in a film noir setting. Diana said, "Nerd, yes. Comic books, no." Okay, that's okay. I'll take what I can get, Diana. I'm just glad that we can be nerds together. One of the heroes, anti-heroes of the show, because they're all somewhat dark characters. There are no good, the sort of guys in the comic or in the movie or in the series, which is some of what I love, because it shows the multidimensionality of it all. But one of the characters, Dr. Manhattan, talks about a thermodynamic miracle, that the fact that we even exist is the result of millions of sperm cells, and the chance that it meets an egg, and the chance that we don't die, and the chance that the same thing happened to our parents. And when we look at that, there is this one in, and we can't even count that high chance that all of those genes came together to create us. And if we come back to that place that is this super rare, amazing gift that we've been given, then it's really tough to dwell in the negative. Or said another way, I'm right here sitting in front of a computer that was beautifully built by people that I've never met, and by hundreds of them that made all of the various components of it using a microphone made by a company that's halfway across the world, and that again, I've never met, and somehow they all managed to show up here so that I can be talking to you. And that's just amazing. And I didn't understand how any of it happened. It just, I mounted the computer there and I hooked the mic up. But aside from my little contribution to there, I don't understand how any of it happened, and it still happened. So I figure that's a win.
Yes. Yes, it is. I love that. Such a great perspective. Nice. Kelly, do we have any more questions?
I did have another question that I thought was a great one. So when you were talking, so Sandy had asked also in the chat, when you were talking about that negative, knee-jerk reaction that we have, do you have an exercise that we can do to take a more positive lens?
Do you want to share something there, Brenda, or do you want me to jump in?
Go for it if you'd like. And if not, I'm happy to jump in.
You could meditate every day for a couple decades, and that'll probably get us closer. I'm still working on that. To go back to some of so there are two ideologies that there's one that I'll share, which is the base when I talk about parts of ourself, that's rooted in internal family systems, by again Richard Schwartz. It is a school of psychology. There are psychologists today who practice internal family systems. It also is around systems. If anyone's seen the movie Inside Out, that's actually based in IFS as well. I'm a little bit partial to IFS because it saved my life. without going deep into that, it was extremely impactful to help me getting out of a particularly tough time, and to get to know parts of myself that were not happy and were not okay. And they were tearing at anything that they could find. And I mention that because the knee-jerk reaction comes from a part in ourselves that usually doesn't feel safe, that usually wants to jump in to be safe. Because if there was a bear, I use this example with clients all the time. If there's a bear charging, I was relaying this story to a friend of mine who's a client. We both have young daughters about the same age, and he's an enigma, but he's kind of a mountain man who lives in the mountains of Colorado. And so I use this example, and I said, if there's a bear that's like coming after our like daughters that are, sitting there, I'm not waiting for them to learn how to walk like away from the bear. I'm going and I'm grabbing them, and we're running away from the bear, right? Because that's seriously unsafe. He said, oh, I just shoot the bear. And I'm like, oh, okay, thanks. Sounds great. But the point with both of these two things is that if I just think that there might be a bear, it's the difference between fear and anxiety. If I just think that there might be a bear, well, then I shouldn't be running in and grabbing our kids and pulling them away, because that could legitimately be traumatizing. Just because of my own anxiety, just like my friend Micah should not, because he thinks that there's a bear, whip out his gun and start shooting. That would be crazy. So my question always is to the knee-jerk reaction is, what part of us doesn't feel safe? And is that because things really aren't safe and we need to reassess the boundaries and the standards that we've allowed in that situation and in our life? Because sometimes there are things that are unsafe, right? My friend Micah, if he were a little bit less mentally stable, him whipping out a gun would legitimately not be safe, right? But the fact that he's actually trained by special forces and has like this incredible experience, and is a Bernie voter, which I don't understand. I don't understand. He's an enigma. But how all of that happens, if there's a part of me that feels unsafe in the situation, and there's nothing outwardly that makes if there is no real danger that's there, well, then I have to ask, what is that part of me afraid of? Like, what happened in the past to that part, and how can I parent that part of myself? How can I, like, in my own mind, get down on one knee and say, hey buddy, what's going on? Like, why was that so hard for you to hear? Or like, why was that so hard to, why did your heart start racing when you were in that spot? What's going on? What does that remind you of? And the more that he feels heard, the less unsafe he feels. I also find a shortcut to that whole thing just to get curious, if we can disconnect from the situation itself. And if anyone saw the TV show Bones, was on for a while, it was a phenomenal cast, was kind of cool. It was about this archaeologist who solved crimes, worked with the FBI, and she would solve crimes where there were no bodies. So she would study the bones, right? And she would have Sandy loved it. All right, Sandy. We're back on it, me and you. So she would put all the bones on this light table, right? Where like the light was shining up through it. And I use that metaphor in my mind to be, when there's a situation that I don't understand and especially might be threatening, I just go into the room in my mind with the archaeologist, and I put all the facts on the light table. And they're there on the light table. They don't affect me. They're not real. I'm studying them, and I'm just getting curious about what they are. So I'm just asking more questions, totally disconnected from the outcome, because I can choose to just put it back in a box and be like, oh, no, I'm not touching that. And sometimes that's true, right? Like, I have clients that I would never talk to again because they're just not, because it's not going to be fruitful for me to talk to them again, right? Now that's a minority. If that were a larger percentage, I'd have to look at why. But there are some of those where I just pack it back in the box and I put it away. But for the purposes of getting to understand what happened, relationships, clients, whatever it is, I just get super curious. Just keep asking questions.
Yes. So awesome. And I will build one little piece on top of all of the goodies in there that Tony shared to answer the question too, Sandy, is my belief, and I believe this is also supported in the neurobiology and neuroscience and what we understand, is the nanosecond that your reaction happens, you cannot control. Maybe, as Tony said, after 15, 20, 30 years of meditation or some of these other processes, that we have trained our nervous system so that in the moment of that fraction of a second of the stimulus coming, we might have more capacity. But we're still talking such a nano fraction of a second. So that's not the point where we have influence. It's not the point where we have the opportunity to make a choice. It's second number 2. So the first thing happens, and so not to judge ourselves and get on our case, is like, if we all of a sudden, our system goes on alert and it goes into fight, flight, or freeze. And I think the distinction that Tony makes is wonderful around difference between fear and anxiety. Is there a bear, or we think there's a bear? Very different. So whether we think there's a bear or not, that if we think there's a bear, we're having that physical reaction and all of the pumping, all of the hormones through of adrenaline and everything else so that we can flee if we need to, are happening. So then second 2 is then to start to say, okay, is there really a bear? And so the curiosity piece is key there. Okay, what's really happening? What is real? What is so? And how do I know how do I know it's true? So getting curious and then asking those questions. And then that's where we start to have influence, is then what we do with it and getting the clarity about what really is happening. Because sometimes it can just trigger us into a whole, we get flooded and then we're bringing in past situations. So use these tools. But I say that because I also want us to be thoughtful and kind to ourselves, and that not to judge that it happened. That's not the place where it's where, okay, great, it happened. And kind of same thing as Tony was saying earlier. Okay, now what's the data? Now what's going on? Let's unpack this. What's really here? That's where we have the opportunity to influence. So these are questions, fantastic. I love them.
Is there similarly to go on that line, a question to ask yourself when you have seen that knee-jerk reaction happen, is there part of myself that wants there to be a bear?
Mm-hmm.
That is there part of me that wants there to be a threat? Because it's actually easier to deal with do I have a part in myself that wants to wave the gun around and go to that place because it's felt pushed down, it's felt not listened to, it's felt like I don't have a voice or I don't deserve to have a voice. So there's part of me that wants to turn the situation all the way up to 11. And if I can get to know that part, then I can show up in that situation and have a voice that doesn't need to be screaming. And that's real power, right? That's real power in that situation. Because when we turn it all the way up to 11, we lose our power.
Yeah, we do. We're in reactionary mode at that point. So I agree with you. I don't think we're powerful at all. There's a lot of energy in it. And sometimes for some people that feels powerful, but it's force. There's a difference between power and force,
yes.
Which is a subject for another time. And I don't know if we have,
and for us to talk about presidents more too. We can talk about,
so there's a
dancing through the minefield.
Yes. So beautifully though. Oh my goodness. And so valuable in doing so. Cause right. We're talking, both of us are huge stands for courageous conversations. So I think we got to practice that. And so there's 2 things, Tony. One is I want to get to what you're offering people, because it's a tool that is going to be very helpful for people to help them as they navigate some of this terrain that we've been talking about. And then there'll be opportunity for any final thoughts. And I also, if you're open to it, I think we've kind of tripped into inadvertently some really interesting territory on the IFS front. And if there's something that you feel open and you can totally say no, because this is all bonus at this point. And that how I made a difference in how it saved your life. Is there any part of that too that you would feel open to sharing? Because I think it's new material for some people.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
I think that could be really helpful.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm, and I said this too, I think this is some of of why you, Brenda, felt comfortable asking, because I said to her that, you know, and she knows from the times that we've been able to chat that I'm an open book. There's some things that aren't professional or that I won't dive into in a public forum, but that I was about to say I have no shame. I have shame. I also just put service above shame. That if it's going to serve people, then I'll show up and I'll risk being embarrassed for the opportunity to serve. 20, as bad as 2020 is, I feel uniquely suited. I feel like I was uniquely suited for 2020, especially the second half of it, because where everybody struggled in 2020, that was my 2019. I had 12 family and friends die in 14 weeks, including my dad, my grandmother, 2 friends from high school, and a number of other family friends and people in there, and a business partnership crumble with in just some really tough kind of ways that hit me. And thanks, Sandy. It was. There's no way I can sugarcoat it. There's no way I can sugarcoat it. It was really bad. And a business partnership crumble, a reasonably new marriage with my wife that was it was our first 2 years of marriage in that period of time, and was super rocky, right? A super tough way to kind of form the norms of our relationship. And she was pregnant with our first daughter through a chunk of that time as well. And it brought out in me, by the end of last year, it sort of surfaced things that had gone on when I was a kid that I had repressed, that I had like managed. I was good. I was high functioning. Don't you see? I have my own business. I drive a Tesla. What could be wrong? What could be wrong with my life? A lot is the answer to that. And the diagnosis that I received was complex post-traumatic stress disorder, which is not where it's not like I saw my buddy get shot in Kandahar. I've never been to Kandahar. It was more like in a period, like in the first decade of my life, it was a lot of repeated sort of little traumatic events that were super tough, and that I had handled and I'll put quotes around that, except only parts of me had handled that. Not all of me had handled that. And I was suicidal, would not be the right word. But I wasn't I was still super self-aware, so I was okay, but I could see that there wasn't too many. I also had a health condition that kind of flared up in that period of time. So I was in some excruciating pain in that period, which will make anyone go crazy. And I wasn't that many steps away from saying, I just don't think I can do this anymore. And I was actually at a mastermind kind of an event, not all that unlike this one. And a friend of mine was speaking about some experiences that he had, and it hit home in that he had actually talked about preparing to kill himself. And this is kind of deep. I'm sorry, although we also asked. So I feel like we gave people a little bit of a warning into it. And he had actually described that, he was in the bathtub with the razor blade, and he heard a voice that said, are you really going to let this be the way that, you go out? And he called a friend, and a friend of his introduced him to someone that is now a dear friend of mine, and is an IFS practitioner who I am working with. Her name's Heather, and I am whispering in her ear on a weekly basis. She's this close to actually publishing some of her work in some courses, so that it can get out to more people, because she has no room for one-on-one clients. But in a matter of 3 months, she solved what, for me, I wasn't able to get my arms wrapped around in 35 years of being alive. And that was a magic trick. That was pretty cool. And not in a way of, I'm just going to forget this, or I'm going to have tools to manage this. It was in a way of, we're actually going to integrate this, like in a deep down kind of a way. We're going to integrate. And so I'm not a mental health professional. I don't pretend to be, even on TV. I don't play one on TV either, but I do. But IFS is really interesting in that it is a systems framework. So it has its applications in business, and we can use those applications, and we can borrow from the language of IFS to be able to have some really powerful conversations. And of course, if there are serious, you shouldn't be reading my guide and having courageous conversations with yourself. If you are having those thoughts, you should reach out to a mental health professional. I just want to make that abundantly clear that, what Brenda and I do is not a replacement for that. It is a way for us to use and pull from those techniques to, and that language to be able to use those in different ways with ourselves and even with our clients in the right client relationships.
Yes, absolutely. And yes, thank you, Tony, for sharing that very deep and personal story. And I'm so glad that you did, because it shows you're an example of thriving. And that's the whole thing with this entire series, is that all of our thrivers, as I call you, the speakers, your thrivers, you have done it. You are doing it. You are working through it. And so this does serve and helps people. And yes, absolutely, we're not healthcare professionals. And we, by all means, if you need and you're having issues, reach out, get help, get support. There's lots of different ways to do that. And there are tools. And that's one of the things I think that's so valuable here is IFS is one of them. And so if it exposed you to a new tool, and you don't have to be on the edge of really feeling like, oh, I can't take it anymore. You can be simply on, I really want to get to the next point in my life. And I really want to get to this next level in my business, or I want to get into another relationship, but you're looking to up level and to grow. And there's still something in the way. These tools are there that support you in all different aspects of where you are in your journey. So really powerful. And I think it leads so nicely then into your free gift. So Tony, would you share, please?
Absolutely. So if we want to lead people, if we want to lead anybody, it starts with an inside job. We have to lead ourselves first. And so we thought we'd help you get the party started in a little guide. And it's super simple, 5 questions. And we even include some lines. You can print it out and you can journal right there in the guide if you want to. It is, and Kelly, thank you so much for dropping that link there. It is courageous conversation starters with yourself. So 5 questions for you to get a little bit clear. And I want to presence something in here that it is easy for someone to think, oh, I've done the work. Oh, I think about those things, right? It's really easy for us to say that. And it's also really easy for us to then, when we encounter those problems, to be like, well, I was encountering that problem because it was someone else, because it really is, that the barista, gave me almond milk instead of coconut milk. How could they? That's totally justified my reaction. I'm not speaking about a personal event that I've had, by the way. It's not something that I've done and then had to apologize for. Yes, it is. But the process of looking at this with ourselves, I would just encourage you to say, if you think your life can get better, is that worth taking 15, 20 minutes to have some conversations with yourself? Pick one of these 5 and just spend 15 minutes. Make yourself a cup of tea. Print out the sheet of paper and stick it in a plastic sleeve and take a bath. And even if you don't journal with it, just sit there and sit with it and ask yourself how that question and the thoughts that come up with you, how they land. Because if your life can get better, then it starts with what you can do inside. I mean, Brendan and I can help you with the things that you need to do outside, don't get us wrong, but it starts with the conversations inside, and with you leading yourself to say, no, I'm going to make things better. I'm going to thrive and not just survive. And if it helps, hit reply on the when you grab it, it'll send you an email. Hit reply to let me know. I've asked my team to, because it's tagged just for all of you, and I've asked my team to put them all in front of me when those emails come back in, because I want to hear from you. I want to know if it helps, and if it doesn't help, you can let me know too. But if you're a jerk about it, I'll fight back. So get ready.
Get ready. Now bring it. Bring your experience. We're so eager to hear as you interact with these tools. What's your experience? What goes on? How is it helping? And if there's a place where it isn't, great. Yeah, it's data. We're open to data. Both Tony and I are
all
open
the data
to data all the time. Fantastic. Well, Tony, oh my goodness, you over-delivered, of course. And your generosity of your spirit, your courageousness, and navigating some of these aspects and some of the landmines, fantastic. Dancing with you, a blast. I am so grateful, and thank you very much for joining us. Is there any final thought that you'd like to share before we wrap?
I have one final thought, and that is, I'm going to answer the question that I asked you, but I'm going to answer it for you. A few minutes ago, I asked you, can your life get any better? And I'm going to follow up with the final thought and say, yes. Here, I'll do it as like an ASMR. Have you seen those on YouTube? They freak me out a little bit, but I'm still going to do it. Yes, your life can get better. It can get so much better.
Yes.
And that is, and that's not, yes, right. What does that look like? And I'm saying that because in case you were wondering, in case you're like, well, my life is pretty great. Like, I mean, yes, it can get better, and because it can always get better. And I want you to hear my voice, that, if you've stayed this long, and I think that almost everybody has. I've seen all of the names up there, which is amazing. It's so great to see all of you. It's such an honor that you chose to spend some of your Monday with me, and Brenda. And us, and I hope that you do the same thing for everyone else. And if there's one thing that you remember from me, I want it to be your life can be so much, your life, your business, everything that you're doing can be so much better. And that's not an expectation; it's just an offer.
Yes. Tony, thank you.
Thank you.
And so for those of you who have joined us, those of you who are here live, those of you joining us in the recording, we thank you, and so eager to hear your thoughts and your experience. And until next time, thrive on and thrive through.